I know.
That's crazy.
ICU.
No stones tonight.
System just didn't wake up.
Were you in the Bishop up there?
Three times. Last one was 9 millimeters.
I mean, like, and
Welcome everyone to
In the next ward, right?
North Ogden City Council. It's a pleasure to welcome you this evening. I would ask that you mute your cell phone so that, including my own, and to avoid any interruptions during the meeting. Just a note, this is a little bit different structure from now on as far as city council meetings are concerned. The first Tuesday will be a work session, and that's this one here. The second and fourth will be regular city council meetings. And because we are participating mostly in discussion items, and the items will not be acted upon in this meeting, that's the reason there's no public comments on the agenda this evening. But we appreciate you coming and listening in. We'll begin our meeting by an invocation, Pledge of Allegiance by Councilman Swanson.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity to meet together as citizens. We're grateful for our community, grateful for the form of government that we have that allows us all to participate. We pray for civility and for open minds to prevail this evening. And this we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise and join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item on our work session agenda is major project update. Our presenter will be John Call, our city administrator and attorney.
So, council, this is, as you remember, this is something we're going to do at work sessions every month to just kind of help know where the city's headed on the major projects, which again are those projects which are expected to be an expenditure of over $500,000. There's really only two updates this week. The first one is with Monroe Boulevard. All the right-of-way has been purchased that where the landowners wanted to sell the property. And so we're closing out that purchasing program. We didn't end up using all the money that the county gave us for that, so they'll be able to use that to give to other entities, including ourselves, for future right-of-way projects. But, you know, there's basically anyone who wanted to sell to the city has now completed that sale, and so we're giving the rest of the money back. The other one that has an update is the 450 or the 400/450 widening, which is also the 2600 project. It's all kind of wrapped into one. The environmental analysis RFP has been sent out by UDOT, and there'll be a selection process here in the next couple of weeks to pick that person, and then that person will help us come up with some road right alignment and width plans to bring back to the council for the council to approve, as well as that environmental analysis. There'll be some public meetings as part of that, like an open house that we'll probably do over at the senior center, with, you know, maps and things like we did when we started talking about the project a few years ago. We'll bring out some of those old maps as well as some new ones that show the new alignments, or at least the options for the council to talk about. So,
John?
Yes.
On that RFP, is that all UDOT, or do we pay portion of that? I mean,
so we actually
RFP is. I mean, not the environmental study is going all the way up to Alberta, correct?
It'll actually go all the way up to 3100.
Oh, okay.
And we actually are paying for that under the terms of our grant with WFRC. We have to cover the environmental cost, and it's expected to be around $60,000 or $70,000, which is pretty typical for they call it a CADX environmental analysis. And then once that's done, then we will hire next spring an engineering firm to do the detailed design work. And then hopefully next winter or next fall, we'll be putting it out for bid for construction to start in the spring of 2020. So, and that's the plan. And the thing on this to remember is the reason of the $10.5 million that this project's going to cost, $2 million of it's coming from the city, and the other $8.5 are coming from UDOT, WFRC, and the WACOG funds. So we've gotten some significant grants, and that's actually in large part because we're putting in $2 million. Most entities that apply for these grants are putting in about 15 to 20%, depending on how you look at it. So we've actually been really successful in getting those transportation grants because the city council has been funding those projects with city funds. Does anyone have any questions about the other projects that haven't changed since last month, or is there anything that you'd like us to track down to bring back? Okay. Well, then that's all I've got.
Thank you, John. Our next discussion will be on form-based code. Our presenter will be Brandon Bell, our associate planner.
Good evening, members, mayor, and members of the council. So, as John and I discussed this agenda item, we both agreed that, given some other things that the council has scheduled for tonight, we didn't want to give you a big presentation. We felt it'd just be good to go over a brief recap of some of the things we discussed, and then have at the last meeting, and then have a more in-depth one at the November meeting. And the purpose of that recap being to help keep some of these issues on your mind as you read through the code. So I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of some of the issues relating to the code. My main goal for this presentation is to help, and we might need to turn some of these front lights off. My main goal for this presentation is to help paint an image of the type of development that form-based code is intended to produce, so that as you read through the code, you understand the purpose of the requirements of that code and the goal that it's seeking to achieve, so that you can make an informed decision of whether this is a vision that you want to select for your downtown, and if you support the requirements that are necessary to achieve that vision. Those requirements are being the provisions and regulations present in the form-based code. So this is, these are the next few slides are pretty image rich. In the bottom left, you have this is of course the Cannery Center here in North Ogden. And this is again tying back to the concept that this type of a development and you've experienced it before. You've seen it in historic main streets and neighborhoods all across America. And you have some newer development up on the right. You've got an open space type in the front, fronted by buildings on at least two sides in this photo. And then you have down in the bottom right a photo of a walkable neighborhood that supports the more Main Street type of development in the images on the left. And so this is the pattern of development that form-based code is intended to produce, is this walkable development. It's clearly distinct from another type of development which is sometimes referred to as drivable suburban. They're both common patterns in the United States, but they are distinct from one another and have different requirements in order to produce the two different types of development. These are some more images of the Main Street. Again, some basics of these photos, some information that I'm hoping that you are pulling out at this point in time is that the building is directly adjacent to the sidewalk. It's right behind it. The parking is on the street, but it's not in between the building and the sidewalk. And that's a key, one of the most central requirements for making a development, a walkable neighborhood and walkable development. And so these are the sorts of main streets. This is 9th and 9th in Salt Lake City. This is actually in Holiday. This is also 9th and 9th. And before I forget, I want to bring this up. There's a really good project that's going in just on about 21st and 22nd of in Ogden, 21st and 22nd South, that's just behind the America First along Washington Boulevard. If you want to get an experience for the type of development that I'm referring to and trying to paint an image of in your mind, and you want to experience that firsthand close by, that's an excellent project to go visit. There's a few things I'd critique on it, to be honest, but it's going to give you the big idea, and there's a lot of things that are done really well with it. And so if even the pictures, you want a little bit more reality and a little bit more immersion into this type of development, that's a great place to start. There's also Daybreak in South Jordan, and sort of the core of, it's slipping my mind right now. It's in Farmington, and I can't think of it. Something
Not
Station.
Junction. Yeah, station.
Yeah, Station Park. That's would be, so I refer to as a town center without a town. That's kind of the Main Street type of development that you can get in this.
Well, the Junction's kind of like that too, isn't it? Down
That's accurate as well.
There's a new one at Riverton as well.
All right. Well, this is good because this
Made by the
means
same
that
outfit
you
as
guys know
Farmington.
what we're looking for, right? That this sort of code produces. So with any Main Street, the Main Street tends to get the attention, but it's kind of like, the kid who does all the homework for everyone else, right? There's the supporting neighborhoods that make that Main Street possible, right? You can't have viable shops and offices and things like that on a main street without the neighborhoods that create the population that will support that those economic institutions. And so you have to have both the main street and the walkable neighborhoods. And so that's the form-based code is intended to produce both of them. Again, you'll get key common ingredients that you see the buildings are adjacent to the sidewalk. Parking is going to be in back, which we'll see some photos of later. It's not you don't have a driveway that accesses the garage on the front of the home and actually goes through the rear. And again, you do get more flexibility though. For instance, this could, under a form-based code, very easily, the first floor could be a small professional office or even a small shop. And then the second story would allow residential living in the same building. And what the intent of that is it brings down cost of living for a lot of people. They can have a business that's viable with a lower rent because they've got one mortgage instead of two, and allows people to walk to these sorts of services in their own neighborhood, things like that. So there's a whole string of arguments for this type of development that allows convenience for the residents of the neighborhood. There's two different types of development. And what I want to point out with this slide is that it's really I've showed you a lot of the pictures of this, but it's these bones behind the scenes that are called regulation that make or break this type of development, right? And so this is some more photos. And so, we talked a little bit about these last time, but if you don't have certain regulations in place, this is what the drivable suburban. You'll notice that these blocks go on for a while. And for a lot of people, that works very great. There's no value judgment between the two here. But we're saying that it's best if you choose one or the other for any specific area in your city, because they have certain requirements to make both of them viable as a development system. And so if you try and mix and match, that's where it gets a little hairy, so to speak, and things don't quite work out. So again, this is a combination of the Main Street type development here on the upper left, another photo of the Main Street, and then the neighborhoods that support it. You'll see this photo shows you a lot of the elements that come from the regulations. You've got the sidewalk right here, then the building immediately behind it. You do have a little bit of landscaping. There's no driveway that comes into a garage on the front. You can see an alleyway that goes to a garage on the back of these units in the rear. And so that's how it's made.
Brandon, I just got a question. Do you think that this type of development, the form-based code development, causes buildings to be more vertical, which is going to cause? I mean, it appears they do. And are we in this form-based code? And I apologize, I haven't read all of it yet.
Oh, that's fine.
Because it's like 190 pages or something like that. But and I'm a slow reader. But does it talk about the height? I mean, because I know like what's the one on 1700? Yeah, village of prominent point, that has a height limit. I mean, is that, all these address height limits and how they address, like Washington Boulevard? Can you be higher if you're farther off Washington Boulevard at all, or you know what I mean?
It actually works the opposite as it's written currently. The highest would be allowed under the current version of the code is along Washington Boulevard. It does regulate height. It regulates it slightly differently. It regulates through numbers of stories as opposed to an absolute amount of feet. And the reason why is there's certain uses that are going to need a little bit higher of floor, and it gives a little bit choice for the developer to adapt to their needs. There's a maximum height for each story. So you could add up those maximums, and you would figure out a max height in terms of feet, but it does it through stories, so that there's a little bit of flexibility for different developers. The way the Planning Commission crafted it, they decided that they were okay with 4, but what I'm trying to help you to do tonight is see if you buy into the big picture, and not just tonight, but in coming meetings. And that answer could be yes or no. But once you make that decision, if it happens to be yes, then the question becomes, okay, there are some tweaks and some adjustments that we can make to the code. What do we want to make some, and if so, what? So that one of those adjustments could be, we would say, oh, we're really only comfortable with 3 stories instead of 4 along Washington, or something similar to that. There's certain things, as I mentioned in the last presentation, you wouldn't want to vary. Like for instance, block length, in conventional or drivable suburban development, currently we have a maximum block length of 1,320 feet. The short way of explaining how it works in this code is you have a maximum block length of about 440 feet. You're giving a lot less choice to drivers and pedestrians if you lengthen that, because they have to go a lot further around a block. And what you'll read in the code is something called maximum block perimeter, but I'm translating to just say basically one block side is 440 or 450 feet. It's 1,800 and something around a block. That's the maximum. There's a reason why you want to do block perimeter. I won't get into that because it's too detailed, but for right now. But basically, it limits you to about 440 feet on a block. So your question was, about height. It does regulate height. It just does things a little bit differently. Cities often want certainty. That's what they're a lot of times looking for. They want to know that we're going to get a quality result, right? Developers are often looking for flexibility. Form-based code is trying to marry those two and give a win-win for both the city and the developer. So that, for instance, there's a lot of conservative arguments for a form-based code. One of them is that, let's say the market takes a turn and it only pencils for a developer to do a 3-story building. If they were required to go to 4, they can go up to 4 under the code, but they don't have to. If they were required to go to 4, then they say, we just don't think there's a market to support that right now. But it prevents them from not being able to develop anything, in maybe a down market, if that makes sense. Another way it provides that flexibility for the developer is that they can, put different building types on the same blocks, because they've, hopefully if you've done your regulations right, you've determined that these buildings all fit in the same neighborhood together and they play well together. This neighborhood, if they, if we know that these are the allowed building types, and this neighbor's not going to be frustrated that the townhomes are next to this small, 3-story apartment. Those are the sort of buildings types that have been determined to be compatible in the same sub-district. And so, the market changes, and everyone, there's too many townhomes in say North Ogden in this area. No one wants to buy those. A developer can come and say, we want to build this 3-story apartment building, and we've got design and material regulations that have, we've decided to make it compatible next to these townhomes, and it allows that opportunity for those buildings to be on the same block and adapt to the market, but while being visually compatible with one another in a way that's hopefully dignified and harmonious. So I hope you didn't get too much more than you asked for.
Thank you.
Any other questions while we're okay? So lost my ability to move forward on this. I think there we go. So this is the image that I'm trying to paint for you. I've showed maybe 15, 20 images. I'm trying to get this, basic idea of this type of development in your head. And then once we start to talk about and then what I'm trying to say is these are the regulations that make it possible. So the best way I know how to explain it is I was at like a conference on Saturday that actually wasn't related to urban planning at all, but my overactive brain was sitting there and someone made a metaphor about lemonade, and they were talking about economic principle. They were saying, if you, it's kind of like if you put too much water in the lemonade, you want to water it down. Well, you might still have something that you can slightly taste lemons, but it's no longer lemonade, right? Well, the point is that the regulations in this code make that type of development possible. If you water them down, if you add too much water, then you start to lose this type of development. It loses the purpose and goals which it was intended to achieve. And so what I'm trying to invite you to do, once you have a solid image of this type of development, ask yourself, A, is this the type of development that I support for our downtown? And B, do I support the regulations? Am I okay with these regulations being the requirement to achieve that vision for development? And the way I put it in this slide is that these basic type of regulations are the quote purchase price of walkable downtown and walkable neighborhoods to get the type of development that we're viewing images of. And so again, another metaphor is, you're window shopping and you happen to come across something that you like, and then you see the sticker, and then there's the question, okay, is this what I think, is this price worth getting this type of development? And the sticker price, you have to decide how much you like the development, and you have to decide whether you like the price. So the price for it is these regulations: building and parking location, sub-districts, limited maximum block size, connected street network, different street types for different locations, building types permitted by sub-district, and open space types permitted by sub-district. So we'll just go through each of those really briefly. Again, I've talked about this already. Building and parking location. This is the front of these units. This is the back. The parking is in the back, including the garage doors and the alleyway that leads to them. Again, this is in the neighborhood, walkable neighborhood, in the walkable main street. Again, this is the front. You have a nice white sidewalk, an environment that people not only want to walk in, but they'll want to linger in, so that you're prioritizing for the people that want to stay, relax, and spend money as a natural byproduct of enjoying themselves in a place that they like to be in and feel comfortable in. And then you still accommodate for the automobile, but the automobile is in the back. And so that they can get there, they can park, and there actually are there's usually entrances through the rear if they want to go through that way. So in order to make this type of development, you need a whole sort of unit of development, I guess is one way of putting it. You need your more intense Main Street type of environment. In our code, this is called simply downtown Main Street. And then you need the homes that support it. This is the first image I've showed you of what you typically refer to as single family homes. But those are definitely allowed in the code. And then you've got some townhomes, and these could definitely both go in the downtown neighborhood sub-district. You have, again, material requirements and regulations to ensure that these sorts of things are hopefully compatible with one another, and that there's a lot of planning is about managing expectations so that people know what's coming. If they know what's coming, then they can buy into an idea and then when it comes, they're not shocked or revolting, so to speak. And then the downtown market is actually really similar to the downtown Main Street. The key difference is that there's a larger setback and there's a requirement for outdoor dining on most of the buildings for a certain portion of it. The area that we've tentatively slotted for that would be behind the America First building. Those properties there, that would become sort of like a dining district is what and shopping district that the Planning Commission thought of. So. Next thing is, again, limited maximum block size. We've kind of already covered this, but you need that to give pedestrians and automobiles and cyclists, et cetera, choice in order to get one way to the other and to keep their walking distance from, you want to go pick up a gallon of milk on, say, Saturday morning because you need those, Cheerios and you're out. You want to be able to walk and have a pleasant time and not have to necessarily get in a car. If you have too long a block lengths, it makes that trip a lot longer. And then I've lost my other point on that, but I'll come back to it if it seems important and it comes back. The next point is a connected street network. These are This is our attempt to make sure that there's a connected street network. These would not be all of the streets in there. They're just the main streets that we know we need them in this approximate location. So for instance, there's not a lot over here. If this were adopted into if this sub-district were applied to this area, you'd still need a lot more streets, but we've got some sort of mandatory streets in order to keep a connected street district. Let's see. And then different street types for different locations. So this is actually a photo of a boulevard type street. Boulevard's basically the street that would go on your main street. A connector is something that is a bridge between two neighborhoods and would lead you also to the main street. And then a neighborhood street is a typical street. It has some extra, like it's similar to suburban streets, has some extra requirements, does require street trees to be installed, and it's a little bit narrower pavement width. We coordinated that pavement with our public works director and others. So, and then building type can seem a little complex, but to make it as simple as I know how, it's about creating character in a neighborhood. And so instead of talking about, I used the term earlier, single family home. In a form-based code, you're referring to the physical characteristics of the house as opposed to the building, as opposed to what goes on inside it, because you're saying that you can have more flexibility about what goes on inside buildings if they look and feel right and they're in the right position on the lot, things like that. And so a single-family home, what we typically call it, would be referred to as an edge yard building because it has an edge on all four sides. The townhomes are called a terrace building, and the point is to refer to physical characteristics of the building as opposed to the use. And then the final point is, going back here, you're selecting for each subdistrict a set of building types that are permissible and compatible with one another, that are going to create a certain type of character for that neighborhood or that subdistrict. And then you're doing the same thing with open space. So for instance, a plaza and a square are I think these are both permitted in the downtown Main Street type, and then as well as sidewalk dining, but a commons is only allowed in, I believe this is only allowed in the downtown neighborhood development. It's something that's going to be more for a neighborhood scale little park in the immediate residents. And I believe the green is also because it's less hardscape. So these have requirements for a higher amount of them, of the open spaces, to be more urban in character. So if you think urban, suburban, rural, that's kind of a continuum that you can think of, and those are all descriptions of character. And so these components of building types and open space types are intended to be, you select all the ones that are compatible with one another, and then within that set of parameters, the developer can mix and match because they've been pre-selected to be compatible. So it allows that choice and flexibility, but in a way that still provides certainty to the city that we know we've already decided these we're comfortable with in this area in this sub-district because they match one another. They're going to produce an urban character for the downtown and maybe, I don't know if suburban's the right word, but walkable neighborhood character for this sub-district. Does that make sense? So you're kind of selecting style's not exactly the right word, but character's probably better. So you're doing the same thing with the open space types as you are with the building types. And then, I guess as you read through the code, hopefully I've been able to successfully communicate that, I'm hoping that you'll be asking yourself, is this the type of vision that we have for North Ogden and our downtown area, and am I interested in supporting the regulations that will achieve it, and also to help you understand the purpose of the regulations so that they don't seem like what's going on here, what's the point of this. One pointer as you read the code is that remember that, so it's 139 or 40 pages. Remember that as you read it, you're reading in a lot of the chapters options, as opposed to, like, the developer's going to go in and they're going to say, I want to use this street type, and if it's compatible with our map, then it will work. And I want to do these building types, and I want to do these open space types. So there may be 6 or 7 or 8 types of open space. They're going to pick maybe 2 for their project, depending on the size of the project, maybe 3. And so they're not subject to all those requirements. It's, you know, it's like, it's playing cards. They can choose this card or this card or that card, right? And they're going to put all those pieces together because they've been pre-selected. They're hopefully going to come out in a harmonious whole neighborhood that they're trying to develop. So, so again, you know, I hope you ask yourself as you read this code, is this the type of vision that we have for downtown North Ogden? So, are there questions, are there things that aren't clicking, that I'm not communicating clearly, that I can hopefully help explain to you? Okay.
Great presentation, Brandon.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Brandon.
You bet.
Brandon, this form-based code's online, isn't it? If I remember right, it's
I believe so. If it's not,
it's on the it was in the package, so I mean, I think it's.
oh yeah, it is. It's under. It'd be several times under both the city council and the. If you look under this meeting, it should be. Well, actually, I don't know about this meeting, but the last one, it was posted online. So that would have been the September 4th meeting for anyone in the audience that would like to review a copy of that. And I'm also happy if anyone has questions, you can call me and I can answer questions about it. Any members of the public. So.
Thanks, Brandon.
You bet.
Would you catch the lights, Brandon? Or Rob, that'd be good, thanks. Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate that presentation. I will now is that a motion? Entertain a motion to recess and convene the RDA meeting.
I'll make a motion that we recess and convene in the RDA meeting.
We have a motion to convene the RDA by Councilman Barker.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Stoker. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll move on into our RDA agenda. Convene in the RDA meeting. Our first discussions on a request from Dave Gordon for RDA funds.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm David Gordon. The property that I own is at 300 East, 2650 North. It's directly behind Lee's Marketplace, as shown by this. My property butts up against the city property, which is part of the park extension that curves around until it hits 300 East. The reason I'm requesting the funds is to build a barrier which has a French drain built in behind a wall so that the water from the park no longer comes into my property but will drain into a gravel area, into pipes, and then plumb through the storm system that goes through my property. So if you look at the picture here, that's where that wall would be built. The next thing I'd like to propose is to have the beautification project that's been started further down Pleasant View Drive to continue up through that park, put a couple park benches in, a sidewalk, and then landscape that with some trees along that north area there. Right now it's just a wide open grass area. I think that would be a great addition to the park there to take that environment farther down to the west.
Dave, will you walk over there and show us exactly where you're building your wall?
Yes. So, which side do I want to stand on? So currently, this is the 300 East. This is the park. If you keep coming around, this is Lee's, and then you come around the corner, there's the bigger park area here. So it's this wall right here. Currently on the property, the asphalt ends right here. And I can't really continue the asphalt for the parking lot until I know what's going to happen with this interface. And currently, the sprinkling water, basically it comes down that hill. It's a pretty steep hill that comes into the property here and causes lots of weeds and things to grow. So I'm asking if RDA funds could be made available to build this barrier wall, put a gravel behind it, put pipes in it so that the water, when it comes, will then drain into my system and off the property, and then build a landscape behind that to make this area usable. I do have dirt that I've donated to the city partial, that they've been able to use, but I still have some available that could be used to backfill this behind the wall. So instead of being a really steep level, it would make it more of a nice level for the mowing and care of that area right there. Other questions? So why this view? This is not what exists. This is my future view plans. So eventually, like I said, I want to extend the parking lot, put the other building that was approved in the plan when this started in 2007, and finish the decorations and things like that.
So do we have an idea of how much RDA funds we're looking for? Or do
No,
we?
I haven't put any of that together. I was hoping to work in conjunction with your engineers and planners of what would be possible.
We don't know how high the wall would be or thick or anything like that yet, do we?
No, and so just so council's aware, with the RDA funds, there are you have a lot of flexibility in what it's used for. Some cities only use RDA funds for city projects, and other cities actually will pay for improvements on private property because of the inherent value it brings to the community or to the area. Plus, there's an increased tax. So for example, that extra building, if that extra building goes in at some point, then that increases the base tax value of the property, which then in turn comes into the RDA. About 50% of the tax increase goes into the RDA. And so it's really up to the board how they want to spend the funds. In our city, we've done a lot of public projects, but we've also done some private things as well. In the past, the RDA board has approved the facade money to be put towards the facade improvements where the Little Caesars and GNC and those folks are, as well as to help incentivize Smiths to come in and the Ace Hardware. So there has been some money put towards private projects, just so that you understand it's a full spectrum. All of the benches and the wraps on the boxes and utility boxes and things like that have been largely supported out of RDA funds to just help kind of improve the Washington Boulevard corridor. So, yeah, Councilman Swanson.
Are you done? Speaking of the French drain, or referring to the French drain, would that wouldn't be a private project on private property, because that would be done on our side, correct?
I mean, so it would be in conjunction with the wall or whatever, and so what I was trying to say is that even if it was on the private side, it still could count as a public project. It's just I'm trying to think. There's just a lot of flexibility in RDA funds, because the goal of RDA funds is to incentivize redevelopment activity and development activity, typically commercial in nature, and so the RDA just has a whole lot of flexibility. And I think that a lot of people would say, no, having a flat park with a wall, and a French drain to catch that water is much better for the city than a sloped grassy area that nobody uses. So
the other thought I had a few months ago when Dave had me out there and I was taking a look at this is, if it were two private property owners, we wouldn't allow the drainage from the property on the north to flow across the boundary line into the other property, would we?
Not typically. If it was brand new development, no. But Utah's water's a common enemy state.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't encourage it, if that makes sense.
Well, I would support, at least on the French drain piece, that we get together with our engineers and get a cost estimate of what it would take to do what Dave has proposed on the French drain. Dave, I don't remember talking about the little sidewalk extensions and the benches. Could have.
That's all city property, so
Right.
that would just be if
That'd be
RDA
something that we would do to. Okay. Well, yeah, that's my feeling on the French drain piece, that we at least take a look at that and see what we can do to keep water from flowing off of our property onto the area where he would like to expand that parking lot.
Okay. And the other thing to remember is, as members of the RDA board, there's two different funds, and I wish it wasn't the same RDA fund managed by the RDA entity, but there are two different funds. There's a CDA pot and an RDA pot, and the RDA pot expires in 2022, I believe, and so by the end of that time period, we should essentially have spent all of the money we've accumulated on projects to benefit the redevelopment area. And so we probably need to start planning now. If council's okay, or if the board's okay, we'll have Evan put together an estimate on what we have now in the funds, what we're owed, because the RDA loaned some money to the CDA, as well as what we think we're going to collect over the next 3 or 4 years, so that we can start looking at what projects should be funded with this money to fulfill the terms of its original agreement. And so we'll bring back and have a large philosophical conversation on exactly where this money should go and where the board wants to see it go. And it you know, as Dave has clearly identified, we'll be looking for input from citizens and people, property owners in that area, you know, and it'll be everything from probably help with landscaping to facade improvements and all sorts of things that might come in as part of this discussion.
Just so you know, John, I feel the same way Phil does. I'd like to consider this. I'd like to see an estimate on it, but also I think your suggestion of having Evan put up some was a good idea, real good idea. Because none of us were here when we started the RDA. None of us on this board were here when they started it.
Right. So it's a 25-year program, so it was started in 1997 or 98, that time frame.
I was only about 7 years old. Yeah, you weren't born? I wasn't born. No.
And one other thing, council, just in Utah law, with this type of fund, this redevelopment area funds, not every project even has to be in the area. You just have to be able to show that there's a direct correlation between the two. So a good example of that is there have been cities that have built parking structures that were outside of the actual specific boundaries, but they were so close that they directly benefited by adding parking to the commercial area. And so we just, you know, that's something that we'll talk about as ideas for ways to spend the money and that's, you know, and I say that Dave's is the only project that anyone's floated or that anyone's even talked about. So there's going to be lots of ideas coming in the near future, I imagine.
I like it.
Any other questions, discussion?
I have the same thoughts as everyone. I think the city should take care of our own water.
Yeah. With no other questions or discussion, I'll entertain a motion to recess and convene in a work session.
So moved.
Pardon?
Annette says you'll actually adjourn. And
Okay.
so council,
Motion to adjourn, sorry.
and so just based on this discussion, we'll start getting some estimates together so that at some point in the future we can come back with an actual proposal and how much things are going to cost, so that you have something to actually approve and discuss, or not, you know, not rubber stamp approve, but discuss and look at.
Will you
approving.
include a separate proposal for the two little sidewalk bench cutouts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Stub outs, whatever you want to call them?
Yep. And there might be a chance of where there are some trail improvements that Tiffany might have some others in this area for the parks that could be done, and so we might just
Get some grants possibly too for that stuff.
yeah. So, okay. Sorry, Mayor.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. I entertain a motion to adjourn the RDA session.
So moved.
Then moved by Councilman Swanson,
Second.
second by Councilman Turner. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Do you
It doesn't say work session till 7 o'clock. What, we got a 15-minute
let's start
recess?
talking about that?
We could.
Awesome.
Maybe see if the council wants to.
You're talking about moving number 6 up?
Yes.
Did you bring us treats?
Well, Northern Ice season closed Saturday. I've got these in the freezer that are gonna go to waste. I wondered if anyone would be interested.
So they need to do a motion to amend the agenda.
No.
If they want to.
I think you said them right
We
there
won't talk
and
price.
let some of the audience help
Yeah, let's talk
themselves
about
as well.
concept.
There should be
Okay.
15 in here.
Mayor, I'd move that we advance item number 6
RDA funds.
to in front of item number 4.
Okay, it's been moved that we move item 6
Redevelopment,
above item 4
so redevelopment.
in our work session agenda.
7-2.
No, we'll do that after.
Fix it.
Have a second?
I'll second. Or Cheryl. Go ahead.
You're second.
Second by Councilwoman Stoker.
I don't think so.
Is that a roll call?
You can just do it, voice, just everyone.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
What do you got?
Mayor, if I can, while we're moving on to item number 6, I wasn't aware that we weren't going to have any public comments. I certainly understand not having them at the beginning so that we could get through the agenda. But I really think we ought to have some public comments at the end of the meeting. Even though it is a work session, there might be things that we want to hear or that should be said or shared with us before our next meeting. So if council's okay with that, I think right before item 7, if we could insert some public comments in there.
I know.
What's that?
We'll be tight for the 7 o'clock
No, I'm talking, that would be after.
Yeah, but how long is this?
after the
gonna
closed
go?
session.
How long is the session gonna go?
I don't know, but those who would wish to be here to make comments, I think we ought to let them.
We may not have any public available, but. it's-
We may
I'm
not,
okay.
but I think we ought to have it there. That's just my personal opinion.
I don't think so. I know it's a work session, no public
So-
comment.
But we've always had comments at work sessions.
So there's two ways to do it. Council, you could make that motion and vote now, or you could do it at that time.
I'll make the motion now that after we've discussed the sale of Public Works Building property, after the closed meeting, that we insert public comments. Anybody else?
I'll second it.
It's been second
You don't have to.
I know. No,
by Councilman Barker.
Any more discussion?
Any more questions or discussion?
Yes. If you're going to do that, then I would suggest we do it right after after number 6 and not wait till after closed session.
I agree with you.
The
I can support
timeline
that,
is, the closed session needs to start at 7.
No, they'll have to be quick. Everybody will have to be quick.
Okay, we do it right now.
Get on their toes.
we could do public
Snooze or
comments
you
now.
lose.
I'll
instead of
amend
6.
my motion to what Cheryl said.
But that, you won't have the council comments until after the closed meeting.
Correct.
Right.
So I don't know that it matters.
Leave it as is then.
So the motion is,
Just do number 6 and go into closed session and then come back and reconvene afterwards for comments.
after the closed session. I think that's the way we had it outlined.
Yep.
You're talking public comments or just staff comments, staff and council comments?
I'll concede to you for if anybody's out there for public comments.
Okay. There may not be anybody, but I just want to make sure that we're giving that
So I'm not clear
opportunity.
exactly when you want the public comments to come in.
What's that?
You want them to come in right now,
No.
No, it'd be after the closed session.
After the closed session.
after the closed session? Okay, given the fact, we want to proceed with 6 or go into the closed session and wait till 7?
I had not anticipated 6 being very long, because it's more of a, this is where we're at, where does the council want to go from here type of a discussion.
Let's get to it.
Okay. We had a motion to move item 6 up above item 4.
So I think we approved that one, Mayor. The other motion that was on the table was the one for public comments at
Okay.
the, right before item 7, at the end of after the closed session.
So did we need to finish that one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then we've had the motion for public comments
Actually
to
get to it.
occur after the closed session. We have a second.
I'll second again.
We have a second, Councilman Barker. Any questions or discussion? Begin the voting by Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Severie,
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay, item 6, discussion on the sale of public works building property. Presented by John Call, our city administrator attorney.
So, council, we have declared the public works property, which you see here, this is the old site, as surplus property. That was part of the discussion on whether or not to sell a portion of it to the Coldwater Animal Hospital for parking. Since the council declared the whole thing as surplus, we've had several people in the community approach the city about what the council wants there, how they're going to sell it, if they're going to sell it, that sort of a thing. And we actually have had someone give us an actual offer for exactly, and because there's an actual monetary value they've given us, that's something we'll actually talk about in the closed session. But it is a proposed use, and the council can talk about whether or not they want to accept that offer. I think staff is not recommending the council accept that offer. And I know it's kind of a cryptic message because the way that the closed meeting rules are written is the council doesn't talk about appraised values and offers in open meetings because it hurts our ability to negotiate the most advantageous deal for the city. And so I'm thinking that this has kind of put us in a position where the council should look at how do we want to, well, first off, do we want to market this property? There are a lot of things going on this property still. The Family Promise Group uses the easternmost building of this for their organization. The police have some evidence storage over there. There's still some floats. Our city float is stored over there. But so there's some things that the city will need to work through as we start to look at the possibility of marketing this. The flip side is this property is a water asset, and we are putting a lot of money into some water projects in the next couple of years, and this might be able to help offset some of that cost so that we're not having to raise rates specifically for those projects. So obviously it's not a promise that rates won't go up, but it'll offset some of those costs. And anyways, as I had thought about this, and I talked with the mayor a little bit, I think if we are going to move towards selling this property, probably the way to do it would treat it like an RFP or request for proposals. So we could put out some information and say, well, we want people to come to us with what they want to do on the property and how much they're going to pay us, because there's a chance that, and I'm going to pick terrible examples. Someone might come and say, well, I really want to put an auto wrecking yard on that property, but I'll pay you $4 million to do it. And someone else will come and say, well, I want to put a hospital for young children on that property, but I can only pay you $200,000. And so then the council gets to look at all the proposals and weigh and pick which one they think is the best. In that situation, the person who's buying the property gets a lot of certainty from the council on what they can do with the property, which I'm hoping would create some increased value in the property. Because most people who buy pieces like this are buying it at a low rate because there's a risk they're not going to get what they want. In this situation, they'd actually be able to get what they want. But questions, concerns, does the council even want to look at the possibility of selling this? I know it will displace Family Promise, but most likely it would be a year or more out because of all the stuff that a developer is going to be going through anyways. or do we want to keep it and use it for city property, for a park, or, everything's on the table. So I don't anticipate this is going to be an end-all discussion tonight. It's kind of just to start the discussion. In fact, it might even be I would say it would be worth reaching out and letting everyone know what the council's thinking of doing to get feedback from the residents, because there's likely to be someone out there who's got a better idea of what we could do with this property than I do. So,
Well, John, I was approached by the president of the Family Promise, and they'd like to extend the lease into at least December of 2019. So if it looks like it's gonna be something that's gonna be a year or so out, that seemed pretty probable then, right?
I would think so. More than likely, anyone who's going to do anything on the ground isn't going to get it done in 6 months. There's too much time to draw up stuff and get things going. And I'm actually anticipating our RFP, if we did go that route, wouldn't be closing until March or something. We'd put a lot of time into writing the RFP and then leave it out there for 3 or 4 or 5 months so that you get lots of market exposure and you get everyone to kind of, people know that it's there and they can bring their proposals. Which then you're only 6 months away from December of 2019 for Family Promise. So
do we need to tonight approve the additional lease extension, or?
No, we'll bring back the lease extension in a future meeting.
Okay.
But essentially, this is just help the mayor and I understand what do we want to look at selling it, and what steps you want us to bring. We'll talk a little bit about the value of the property in the closed session, and then talk about ways that we can possibly increase that. There again, because we're talking about a way to get the city the most advantageous deal, that's why we talk about that in the closed session.
How many acres is it again?
It's roughly 3. It's under 3, but and we do have to keep this little building down here. That's one of our well houses, and we will be keeping that. That's one of our most productive wells in the city. And so there are some other constraints, plus the cell tower that's right here will be staying as well. But there's still quite a bit of space that people can work with.
There's a part of me that I could see the value, contributing the sales price to the water needs. On the flip side, now maybe this is just my ignorance of what property the city has, but could there come a day where the city might wish we kept that property?
The city has in the past gotten rid of property we wish we would have kept. The best example of that is in the 1950s. The city reduced the right-of-way on Washington Boulevard heading north to Alberta from 132 feet wide down to 66 feet wide. And now we're buying it back. Not all 132 feet, but we're buying back a chunk of it. So that's all part of the conversation, because someone might say, you know what, we really need to keep this property, and maybe that's where we need to build the police station someday, or that type of stuff. So this is just to kind of start the conversation so that we can pick through it and make sure we're not missing something before we pull the trigger on something. So any information you'd like for staff to work on as we start bringing this up, I imagine we'll probably talk about it for 2 months before the council makes a decision. So that's, it'll be kind of slow and methodical, but hopefully end up in the best for the city, whatever that decision is. Questions, comments? Okay.
Were you looking for more from us?
No, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't an initial gut check concern about the kind of the direction that I was thinking we were going to go on bringing information back to the council. So.
My gut check is we keep it.
There's no other questions or discussion on that item? Entertain a motion for
Mayor, I'd move that we recess from the work session into a closed meeting to discuss the character, professional competence, and physical or mental health of an individual, and to discuss strategy regarding the sale of real property.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Swanson to move into a closed session to discuss physical and mental health of individuals and regarding strategy session of sale of real property. And
Can I just say one thing, and this is something that I think council hasn't been trained on for closed sessions, and I'm sure the public isn't aware of either. Most of the documents that are discussed in closed sessions are public documents once they're no longer protected. So in this case, the offer that the city's received will remain a private or a protected document until we've decided to accept and reject and what the ultimate decision for the property is going to be. So in 2 or 3 months, that document will be a public document, but it'll be private for the next couple of months while we kind of work through this approach. So just so council knows, as well as the public, that it'll eventually will be public. It's just not quite yet.
okay, with that explanation, we've had a motion and we've had a second. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I feel like I haven't seen you for a while.
No. I didn't think I was busy. I was studying for the coach first pick basketball.